I have two things that have been floating around in my head over the last week. And one of them has to do with what we say and how we say it. And the other has to do with the environment in which we say what we say. And we're going to see if we can bring these two together somehow. So I'm a big fan of what the French philosopher Jacques Lacan has to say about our drive and our desire to communicate and interact with the outside world. From what I understand, he would largely say that what we say has to do with satisfying the relationship between us and the big other. The big other being this environment and the system that we are involuntarily graduated into. So because we are social creatures, and as we develop into adulthood, we begin to learn that if our decisions and our actions more reflect what is going on in society, that our decisions are met with a more apparent face value to them, that people tend to agree more with people who agree with them, and vice versa. So we don't necessarily do what we want to do, but rather we do the things that we believe that other people will find valuable. And I do find that this becomes more and more true as we move into adulthood and move into deeper relationships with society. So I would suspect that we don't just act in a way that warrants the approval of others, but when we speak, we expect to hear a response that affirms what we just said, right? Whether you're affirming or whether you're negating, you expect to have the response of affirmation or negation from who you're speaking with. So I've been walking around the last couple of months treating the conversations that I've been having with people as though they were these like subconscious dialogues about our insecurities and the way that we choose to fill the gap between what we understand to be true and the things that we are uncertain of. So like, for instance, if you choose to talk about politics, you're largely looking to have your political views affirmed in some way, shape, or form. That you're either looking for a fight or you're looking to have someone agree with you. And like generally we know the outcome like of that before we engage in the conversation. But where things get really crazy, and this might be the crux of what I've been feeling the last month or two, is that because we live in an era of such excessive short form media content, where because everything has been distilled down to, let's call it the most interesting part of the conversation, there are so many bullet points that run through our waking moment every part of the day. So I think that two things happen. That one of them has to do with our ability to digest and reproduce content, and the other has to do with the quality of the content itself. And I swear I'm getting to a point about music and arts at some point. We're streamlining to it. A spoiler alert, it has to do with your being aware of the amount of time that you spend on social media and doom scrolling, right? Ooh, big surprise. So because of the non-linearity of the content, and because of the pace at which we take in this content, that it both fragments and short circuits our brain's ability to be able to focus on something for an extended amount of time. So in this world, we're dealing with the autonomy of thought, and we're dealing with the clarity of opinion, and we're dealing with the compulsion to change subject matters and the compulsion to diverge into non-linear topics. And our ability to maintain an independent autonomy of thought begins to suffer. And like any other part of our lives that we feel there is a gap in, we begin to look for external ways to fill that gap. So if we are unable to finish a thought in our head, whether that be from a lack of focus or a lack of discipline or something beyond our control, my current thought on this is that we gravitate towards adopting an opinion from someone that we hold in high regard and in high taste. That it is easier to hold the opinion of someone that has been socially vetted rather than going through the uncertainty of sharing our own idea. And I mean, I don't blame anybody for that. Life is pretty tricky to begin with, right? And like, if there's one thing that we can do to make things easier, is it's just go with the flow, right? And I say this because I have noticed that it happens to me more often than I had previously realized. That I find myself watching something from an artist that I like or from a speaker that I like, and I find myself living my life as though I was the one who came up with that idea. And it might be a good idea, but the point is that there's something in my head that makes me believe that I'm the one who came up with the idea, even though in reflection, it's from some short that I watched, or it's from some 2-hour lecture that I was into that week. That I really wish I knew what was going on there, and I wonder how much of that phenomenon would disappear if you take the internet out of the equation. But largely what I think that this brings up is it brings up a conversation between tradition and innovation. That it has to do with honoring and maintaining the craft that has come before you, and to respect and honor the shoulders of the giants on which we stand. And then it has to deal with taking the things that we have learned from the tradition and moving them in the most natural progress forward. About being in tune with yourself, your interests, your environment, and creating something that lives organically in the time and space that it was created. And it's about realizing the distinction between the two of them. That the idea in instrumental improvisation is to learn the language that was spoken by the greats and speak it yourself, speak it correctly, and it will naturally come out in the way that you speak. That there's no need to force anything, that it happens naturally because we are all different people and we live in the day that we live in. And the same way that language evolves slowly and incrementally over time, music evolves in very similar ways. And there's most likely an endless well on both sides of that conversation, and you could probably spend your entire life on one side or the other, and inevitably they will cross over into each other. That studying the tradition long enough will lend itself to moments of innovation, and studying innovation for long enough will lend itself to moments of the tradition, because we both have our own identity and we understand that music was around before we got here. And I think it's going to take more and more effort to stay aware of the difference between the two. Because personally, I'm not a big fan of music that's pretending. I'm not a big fan of art that's pretending. And by pretending, I mean that someone is operating in the world of tradition, but presents it in the world of innovation, or that someone is operating in the world of novelty and presenting it in the world of tradition. Or maybe we're just insufferably caught between the bounds of two ends of a spectrum. Maybe the more that we try to create a what and a why in the wrong order will inevitably lead to insanity. Or maybe I'm just talking at a camera and I'm looking to have my own opinion validated to my face. So I'm going to stop talking and get back to it. Take care, everybody.